Yo, what up? This is Deuce, Red Zone on the Lab podcast. Today we have on from the Washington Times, Matthew Paris, beat writer for the Washington Commanders. He's going to come chop it up with us a little bit about the OTAs these past 4 weeks, starting with rookie OTAs, about the rookies who have stand out to him over these past 4 weeks. We also talk a little bit about the draft. What happened at the draft was that his expectations of the draft. We also get a little bit about Eric Bieniemy, of course. We talk about Chase, of course. We talk about Emmanuel Forbes, Sam Howell. So please, on the other side of this, Matthew Paris, Washington Times. Let's go.
This is Hog Farmer Chris and the 2022 Commanders Fan of the Year. Before you listen to Red Zone in the Lab podcast, I want to thank you for your support and bringing awareness to the Hog Farmers Charitable Foundation, which helps children and their families affected by pediatric cancer. You truly make a difference. And with that being said, please don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on YouTube.
Welcome back to Red Zone in the Lab podcast. I am Deuce, and joining me today from the Washington Times, Matt Paris. How you doing today, buddy?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Doing good. So how is it? How has your off season? Has it been busy? Because I don't think there's much going on in Commander Land, is it?
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's been quite busy. It's one thing after another, and I look, and now it's June all of a sudden. So mandatory minicamp this week, and after that should be a little bit quieter. But of course, there's the sale of the team. So I mean,
Yeah.
dude, you always have to be on alert for that.
Yeah. Yeah, it has been busy. You just can't get a break. When you think you got a little break, something pops up.
Right.
And then here we go again. Yeah, so just like kind of going back a little bit. This is my first time talking to you in the off season. Again, thank you for joining us once again. But the draft, let's kind of go to the draft. Did it kind of turn out the way you expected it to, as far as the picks?
I didn't really have necessarily a lot of expectations going into it. It was clear based on how the draft unfolded, they had some priorities. I think first and foremost, they wanted to find defenders who could help create more turnovers. That's why they drafted a guy like Emmanuel Forbes. I think Quan Martin solves a little bit of their issues in the secondary as well, trying to find another slot defender, another safety after releasing Bobby McCain. So they had some objectives going into it, but ultimately I don't think it was the sexiest draft class in the world. None of the picks really were the most exciting, but at the same time, that's perfectly okay because, it's ultimately not about sexiness. It's about winning games, and they feel like these players that they drafted can help them do that.
Yeah, most definitely. So just thinking about that draft class, and I know you had an opportunity to be here throughout OTAs and the rookie OTAs. Which one of those rookies, or how many of those rookies, is actually like standing out on a consistent basis?
Yeah, man, I've been really impressed by Emmanuel Forbes. He's very thin. You see it.
Very thin.
Against Logan. He was matched up against Logan Thomas. Or no, not Logan. He was matched up against Cole Turner today, and you could really see it then. But Hal seemed like, especially today, he was going after him a few times, and Emmanuel Forbes is really there, stride for stride. A lot of Hal's throws, when thrown Forbes' direction, were kind of off the money, and he really seemed to work out with Jahan Dotson, Terry McLaurin, guys he was matched up against. He was running with them stride for stride. So that pick has looked really impressive to me. I think Quan Martin has had some nice moments. Another guy later in the draft is Chris Rodriguez. It feels like he's been a bit involved. Jamin Davis, his former Kentucky teammate, called him a bowling ball today. I thought that was a perfectly apt description.
Just speaking of Emmanuel Forbes and Quan Martin, like we heard Ron, I believe was last week, about them two and BSJ kind of being interchangeable between the slot and the outside. Has there been any pattern that you've noticed, like who's come out first in 7-on-7s or 11-on-11s?
Yeah, as much as they've talked about Emmanuel Forbes being an inside option, I would say he's mostly um, on the outside for now. I think with St. Juice, it really depends on whether like how they're lining up. If it's three cornerbacks on the field, then he's the slot option from what I've seen out there. But a lot of the times you do see them go to three safeties with Quan Martin being that slot guy. Another guy who you didn't mention, who I think is a slot option, is Rashad Wildgoose. Seems like
Okay.
he's had a few nice plays there. Haven't seen as much Danny Johnson in there as past years, which it feels like every season there's a point where Danny Johnson just gets thrown back into the slot and they say, here you go. But so far it's been Wild Goose, St. Juice, and Quan Martin. And I think if my gut instinct would say that they're probably going to go to the three safety to look a lot. So I would
Yeah.
imagine it would be Quan, but depending on the matchup, I could see St. Juice. And, we'll see how it unfolds.
Yeah, that's gonna be very interesting to watch as training camp. While OTA ends, and then as soon as we get training camp, I'm really looking forward to the Ravens joint practice. So please, I know the fans are not welcome, but take lots of videos, like tweet a lot.
Oh,
We
definitely
definitely.
can't
Oh,
do videos of
oh man.
teamwork, but yeah, I get what you're saying.
Oh yeah. So and just stay a little bit of draft. Stromberg and Daniels. The comments Ron made last week about them guys being project players, and I do understand that the third round pick was the comp pick, which is I think was the last in the third round. But still, when you're looking at day one, day two specifically, you're looking for them to contribute some way in year one. Are you surprised that Ron kind of called them developmental? And what are you seeing from Stromberg and Daniels?
Yeah, I'm not surprised necessarily, especially with a guy like Stromberg. You consider what they did at center earlier this offseason. They already paid Nick Gates a lot of money, 3 years, 16.5 million. So when you spend a contract like that or give a guy a contract like that, I think Gates is the clear favorite to start at center. I don't really see it as a competition there, even with a guy like Stromberg and Tyler Larson, who I thought played well when he was healthy. And then Braden Daniels, yeah, very much a project. I think his experience at tackle. He played it in college, but that they feel like for him to play that position at an NFL level, he still has a ways to go. And I also think with Daniels, they have to figure out whether he's best suited for tackle or guard. But they're trying him at tackle right now.
Yeah, that's gonna be something interesting to watch, especially with Tyler Lawson. Like I thought that would be a competition between him and Gates at least, but because of the contract. But hopefully they not just playing him because of the contract and actually put the best person on the field. Before we get started with the podcast, I want you all to go check out You Grow Girl. That's Grow, GROW, written by a dear friend of mine, Jay Smith. It's for daily affirmations for Black women. It is filled with beautiful, colorful images of Black women and powerful affirmations. You can find it at Amazon.com.
We're back! Welcome back to Red Zone in the Lab with Deuce.
Let's get into a little bit of Chase Young. So it's like talking to Ron about Chase Young, it's just all types of like ninja type, secrecy type, maybe a little jab here and there, but it has been some rumblings about their relationship. It might be some little grumble, but to your opinion, just watching them over the last couple of years or last 3 years or so, do you think there's anything there between like Ron and Chase? Is there a concern between their relationship?
I don't know if it's a concern. I guess what I would say about this is that every time Ron Rivera has his like kind of not narrative, but he has observations about players, and when you ask him about the player, he'll largely stick to those observations. And when you present those observations about Chase Young to Chase Young doesn't necessarily agree with them a lot as, say, other players do. So it does seem like there is a bit of a disconnect. Like today, I asked Chase Young about how Ron had been saying that declining the fifth-year option can be a source of motivation. I basically asked him if he agreed with that. And he said, it could be, but there are a lot of things I can use in my motivation as motivation. I'm keeping them in my back pocket. So, it's just kind of like that. It's not enough to say that there's a full-blown disconnect, but there are
Right.
just little things here and there that, yeah, it does require you to read behind the lines at a time. But ultimately, I think both sides would just like Chase Young to be more productive than he has been. I don't think we would have to read between the lines of these statements if he had, you know, double-digit sacks. Heck, even what he had his rookie season, 7.5, and that kind of impact he had, especially in the back half of that year. I don't think there wouldn't be as much dissecting as Chase Young was ultimately still productive.
Were you surprised they didn't pick up his 5th-year option?
Um, I wasn't, in the sense that I was, only because, now you look at their defensive end room, they have so many guys coming up: Chase Young, Montez Sweat, every backup not named KJ Henry and Andre Jones, the guys that they drafted. So it was surprising from that standpoint. But if you were reading the tea leaves of every Rivera comment, it didn't really seem like they were going to. And ultimately, like, I think it makes sense.
Yeah, me too. I agree. So when we're talking about the quarterback position, Ron that's been one of the positions he has just not been able to hit, except if you want to count number 4 as a hit, however you want to count him. But how do you think Ron has approached the quarterback position this offseason? I mean, starting all the way from when we heard the rumors about, Ron kind of confirmed about Taylor Heineke saying no, go ahead and go with Sam Howell for the last game. From that point till now, how do you think do you see any difference in how he's handled the quarterback position?
Well, they definitely kind of gone all in with their chips here about this. They didn't
Yeah.
really want to go down the recycled veteran route again. They were pretty adamant that Lamar Jackson wasn't going to be an option for them. And Rivera has tried throughout his 4 years here of different types of quarterbacks. You had the big acquisition last year with Carson Wentz. You had the middling journeyman with um, Taylor Heineke, I guess, like the unknown, or the journeyman with Ryan Fitzpatrick. You had the young, high prestige first round pick with Dwayne Haskins, who he inherited. You had the system guy in Kyle Allen, and then you kind of had the crafty veteran guy who had been in every system in Alex Smith. And so, the thing that they haven't had is that developmental guy that they kind of bring along slowly and now give him a chance to do that. And I think that's kind of where they've landed on Sam Howell. It has been a shift in kind of what they've said compared to last season, but I do think they do like his development. Maybe I'm just reading too much into it, but they really do seem behind him. I think Sam Howell has had his moments out here in practice, and I think they're determined to giving him a chance because, look, like, if it doesn't work out and they miss on this quarterback, then they're probably not going to be here next year. And I don't know if a guy like Derek Carr or pick your litter of, you know, guys who are available or were available.
Mhm.
I don't know if they would have ultimately made much of a difference. And I'll note they brought in Jacoby Brissett, so if Howell doesn't do well or if he gets yanked early, then they can go to a guy who's had experience. Ultimately, not the most successful everywhere, but he is an option, and he's coming off a career year. I thought Jacoby Brissett played really well last year.
Yeah, that was my next question for you. Like, is there a chance that, or what will have to happen besides injuries as far as play production for us to see Jacoby Brissett week 1 against the Cardinals?
Well, week 1, I would be shocked at this point. I mean, today Rivera was asked whether he was still considered it to be a competition. He said yes, but I mean, everything we've seen so far is Sam Howell, Sam Howell, Sam Howell. Brissett talked to the media today. Um, but in terms of how would have to just be a disaster in the preseason, be a disaster in training camp for them to actually seriously consider making that switch. I think the bigger question is, once the season starts, how long is Howell's leash? If they get off to a slow start, as Rivera's teams tend to do, does Rivera feel tempted to make that change to Brissett? They have that as a backup option, but right now I think it's solely a backup, and they're going to give Howell every chance. to do this thing.
Yeah, we cannot start slow on offense or defense this year. But Eric Bieniemy, what has been the difference between like last year OTA shirts and shorts compared to this year's OTA shorts and shirts?
Well, it's definitely a lot louder. There is a lot of attention to detail, kind of making his voice heard. It wasn't as loud today, surprisingly, but last week he was really getting on a guy like Brian Robinson for mistakes. Just really, really kind of harps the details. And I'm hesitant to say that it's like, because you never know how Scott Turner is in the meetings, or he could have said, to a guy privately or at practice, harping on the details. But from what the media has been able to see, just because the enemy is so loud, it does seem like a clear difference. I asked Brian Robinson the other day if it was a difference. He said, yeah, that's something that we probably didn't have last year from an OC perspective, in terms of the level of detail. So I do think it is the phrase that everyone has kind of used with the enemy is sense of urgency. Bieniemy brings that sense of urgency to Washington. I think it kind of reflects where they are as a franchise right now, and I think players have enjoyed playing with it for him so far.
So I don't know if you know, but one of the beat guys that was there today said Bieniemy snatched somebody out the huddle. Do you know who that was?
I don't recall off the top of
Okay.
my head of what or when. Like, it just depends on when the practice. I was watching a lot of the defense today because of
Okay.
Chase Young, but
Yeah.
first year.
Warren Sapp, is that something that's going to continue, or is he just pop in when he pops in?
Yeah, he popped in last year. He's really good friends with Jessica Scagnia, dating back from their Tampa days, and or is it? Yeah, or maybe it's Mark Mayhew. Maybe anyway, he was here last year, here again this year. We got a chance to speak to him last year, and he said that coaching full time wasn't something that he was interested in doing. He was going to Mexico when we were talking to him, and was looking forward to having the flexibility to do that. So I don't think coaching is necessarily in his future, but that's it's a welcome voice to have around for, I think, like mini camp. I think it kind of adds it that the variety of it is a little bit different. It breaks up the mundane, rather. That's the phrase I was looking for.
Yeah, there it is. Last question, Matt. When I was there a couple weeks ago, like I didn't, most of the time I didn't know where Ron was at.
Sure.
Like he's compared to what I noticed when I was there last year. Like you could see him at least 10 yards or whatever behind the offense, but I just didn't know where he was at. And then, some rumors about like what this looks like, some political stuff. You hear some things on Twitter, but for you, do you think there's like some type of succession plan in place? Does it look like that just watching practice, or what you think, Matt?
No, I would say Ron Rivera throughout his 4 years here, even before Bieniemy arrived, has always been a pretty big delegator. You think of it, depends on how much you buy into Rivera or whatever, but you think about his little sayings and the draw me a map and like all those things. But he believes in empowering his assistants. One time, he was giving a speech to rising assistants around the NFL, like scouts and quality control level guys, and they allowed media during the pandemic to sit in on that over Zoom. And that was one big thing Rivera kept talking about, is empowering your staff, making sure that they have a direction, and giving guys the responsibility to lead practice. So you do see an expanded role, I think, here for Eric Bieniemy from what he was used to in Kansas City. But I also think Rivera kind of likes it that way. He feels like it's a welcome change they needed. Kind of to be uncomfortable was the word that he used. Or not, sorry, to get him out of his comfort zone was the phrase that Rivera used. So I think there are some changes to his approach a little bit, but at the same time, I enjoy Succession, but I don't know. A
Nice
plan.
plug there, man.
Yeah.
Nice plug there for sure. Matt, thank you so much. I saw like before the show you dropped your latest article about Chase Young
Yeah.
and ready to play out this 5th-year option. So I'm going to retweet it, and everyone that's listening, I advise you to read it. But other than that, like how people that is listening, like on social media, how often do you write certain articles? Just let the
Oh
people
yeah,
know
I write
how to
every
follow
day. I mean, I write Monday or Sunday through Thursday, sometimes Friday. I'm working around the clock here. So, the Washington Times is also not just football, it's a one-man sports department. So I cover a bit of everything, but Commanders is my main beat. I tweet and write mostly about the Commanders. And so yesterday was about the offensive line. Today will be about Chase Young. Tomorrow will probably be about their OTAs and kind of making up for lost time given the penalties in last year's
Oh yeah, I can't
system.
wait
And
for that. Yeah,
so,
I can't wait for
um,
that one.
yeah,
Uh,
so I'll have a lot planned and a lot to do, and it never stops. But you can follow
yep,
me on Twitter at Matthew_Paris and check me out in the Washington Times.
yep. Thank you so much, Matt. This is Matthew Paris, Washington Times. We appreciate you so much for joining. Everyone out there, this is Red Zone Lab Podcast. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you for watching. Remember, do it because you love it, not because it loves you. One beat, one sound, one heart, one love.
Thank you for listening to Red Zone in the Lab podcast. Please subscribe to YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Google, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Also, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Remember, do it because you love it, not because it loves you. One beat, one sound, one heart, one love.